tell me, I have no objection to hearing it.
But Netherfield has been taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England. His name is Bingley.
Is he married or single?
Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A young single man, large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girl.
Kitty and I have already heard your news from Aunt Phillips at Meryton.
The man must wear uniform, or we can't think at all. I remember the time I liked a red coat myself.
Enough, you still do, my dear.
Well, if a fine young colonel of 5,000 or 6,000 a year should want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him.
Lydia talks constantly of Mr. Wickham as the most elegant of the officers at Meryton, though I doubt if he has a private fortune.
Do you think I'd ask him about a thing like that? Anyway, he was after my sister Elizabeth. Are you going to finish him upstairs? Yes, bring the ribbon with you.
Really, my dear, I have something I wish to discuss with your father.
Then I shall retire to my room for a little further study.
Now, my dear, how does Mr. Bingley's fortune concern Jane and Elizabeth?
Oh, my dear, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I'm thinking of his marrying one of them.
Is that his design in settling here?
Besides, nonsense. But it is very likely he may fall in love with one of them. Therefore, you must visit him at once.
Oh, you and the girls may go. Or perhaps you may send them by themselves, which would perhaps be still better, for as you are as handsome as any of them, Mr. Bingley might like you the best of them.
Oh, my dear, you flatter me. Well, I have had my share of beauty, but I don't consider myself to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, sure to give over thinking of her own beauty.
In such cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of.
As Sir William and Lady Lucas are certain to go, as they have Charlotte's future to think of. Oh, please, consider your daughters. It will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not.
I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you. I'll send a note by you, assuring him my utmost desire that he choose whichever of our daughters he chooses. Although I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie.
Oh, you will do no such thing. I'm sure Lizzie's not a bit better than the others, but she's not half so handsome as Jane, or half so good-humoured as Lydia.
No?
Oh, but you are always giving her the preference.
Am I?
Oh, you do this purposely to vex my poor nerves.
You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I've heard you mention with consideration these 20 years.
You don't know what I suffer.
But you would get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year coming to the neighbourhood. I hope to be undisturbed in the library.
Oh, Mr. Bennet.
Lady Lucas and Miss Charlotte Lucas.
Oh, Sherman Hill.
Yes, madam.
Hill! Tell Miss Jane and Miss Elizabeth that we have guests. Lady Lucas. Charlotte, my dear. Oh, where you're looking. We have but a short time to stay. Oh, don't say that. I've been looking forward to a nice long chat. I thought you would be interested to know that we have called at Netherfield, and Mr. Bingley has returned our call. So soon. How agreeable of him.
mind of her own, and so no doubt has the young man.
Oh, how can you upset me like this? What do you think that's happened in this matter?
This matter being Mr. Bingley, I assume.
Mr. Bingley? Oh, I am sick of Mr. Bingley.
Oh, why on earth didn't you say so before? I've known as much, I certainly would not have called upon him. Very unlucky, but I've actually paid the visit. We cannot escape the acquaintance now.
Oh, well, I have. Oh, good of you, dear.
And you can all meet him at the ball.
This is Papa's idea of a good joke on us all.
Oh, to call and never say a word about it until now. Oh, if I could see that one of my daughters happily settled at Netherfield, and all the others equally well married, I should have nothing more to wish for. Oh, Lady Lucas will soon see the charges never dead of my own girls.
Mamma, what do you think? I saw him from the window upstairs.
What on earth are they talking about?
Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham is calling. How many callers we have this afternoon, Sherman Hill?
Yes, madam.
Mr. Wickham, I shall leave you to the tender graces of the ladies whilst I retire from life. I am charmed, I assure you.
I shall continue with my extracts.
I come with an invitation from your sister, Mrs. Phillips.
How nice of you.
She will be most grateful if your daughters would dine with her for dinner tonight, and perhaps a game of lottery tickets afterwards.
Oh, Mamma, say we may go. So many of the officers will be there in the evening. Well,
I should especially like Miss Elizabeth to attend.
thank you, but I think not. I shall go. You may escort me there yourself.
I'll go too.
Do see us, Mamma.
Oh, very well then. But mind you behave yourself and don't flirt with the officers.
No, we don't flirt.
Oh, well, go and fetch your wraps then, dears. I must go and see about dinner.
Won't be a minute, Mr. Wickham.
I wish I had a new bonnet to wear.
We were just discussing the new tenants at Netherfield. Have you met them yet?
I have been associated with Mr. Darcy since my infancy.
Indeed.
I have no right to give you my opinion. I've known Mr. Darcy far too long and far too well to be a fair judge. My father was steward of Henry, the Darcy estate. The late Mr. Darcy was a man of great attachment to me. The late Mr. Darcy was one of the best men that ever lived. But his son is a very different sort of man. I was not meant for the military.
I was raised for the church and should at this time have been in possession of a very valuable clerical living.
You mean Mr. Darcy interfered?
The late Mr. Darcy was my godfather and excessively attached to me. He bequeathed me a living and sought that it should provide for me amply. It was given elsewhere.
Heavens!
How could his will be disregarded?
Why did you not seek legal redress?
Mr. Darcy chose to doubt his father's wishes.
It's quite shocking. He deserves to be publicly disgraced.
And at some point or other he shall be, but it shall not be by me. Till I can forget his father, I can neither define nor expose him.
But what could have induced Mr. Darcy to behave so cruelly?
A thorough determined dislike. Dislike I can only attribute to jealousy.
Then how has Mr. Darcy been allowed to treat you as badly as this?
How can Mr. Bingley be friendly with such a man? Surely it must be some mistake.
Mr. Darcy can please when he chooses. Miss Elizabeth, your sympathy means much to me.
Do you notice my new bonnet?
Oh, what's becoming, Miss Lydia?
Come with a clear.
I hope to see you soon, Miss Elizabeth, Miss Jane,
Thank you.
ladies.
Bye, Jane. Bye, Lizzie.
The village of Longbourn was only a mile from Meryton, and Lydia and Kitty were often tempted there to visit their Aunt Phillips and the milliners over the way. These visits were particularly interesting in respect of the recent arrival of a militia regiment there. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Bennet and her daughters were delighted to find Mr. Bingley attending the local dance, together with his sisters and his friend, Mr. Darcy.
Darcy. I must have you dance. I hate to see you standing about by yourself.
I certainly shall not. You know how I detest it unless I am particularly acquainted with my partner. Your sisters are engaged. There is not another woman in the room with whom it would not be a punishment to stand up with.
Darcy! Oh, no, be so fastidious as you are for a kingdom. Upon my honour, I never met with so many pleasant girls in my life as I have this evening. Several of them used to be uncommonly pretty.
You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
Oh, Miss Jane Bennet is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. But there was one of her sisters standing just behind us who was very pretty. Dare I say, very agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you.
Whom do you mean? She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, and I am in no mood at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. You had better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles. You are wasting your time with me.
Mr. Darcy, what a charming amusement for young people this is.
There is nothing like dancing. I consider it one of the first refinements
Of polished societies.
Certainly, sir. And it has the advantage of also being in vogue amongst the less polished societies of the world. Every savage can dance.
My dear Eliza,
Why are you not dancing?
Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present my niece to you as a very desirable partner. You cannot refuse to dance, I am sure, when so much beauty is before you.
Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreat you not to suppose that I moved this way in order to beg for a partner.
Miss Bennet, will you allow me the honour of requesting your hand for the next dance?
No, thank you, Mr. Darcy. I am quite resolved in this matter.
You excel so much in the dance, Miss Eliza, that it's cruel to deny me the happiness of seeing you. And though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he can have no objection, I am sure, to oblige us for 1/2 hour.
Mr. Darcy is all politeness.
He is indeed. But we cannot wonder at his complacence, for who would object to such a partner?
I can guess the subject of your reverie.
I should imagine not.
You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in this manner, in such society. And indeed, I am quite of your opinion.
I was never more annoyed. The insipidity, and yet the noise.
The nothingness, and yet the self-importance of all these people.
Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you. My mind was more agreeably engaged. I had been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Ah, and now I desire to know what lady has the credit of inspiring such reflection.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet? I am all astonishment.
How long has she been such a favourite? And pray, when am I to wish you joy?
That was exactly the question I expected you to ask. A lady's imagination jumps from admiration to love and love to matrimony in a moment.
Nay, if you are serious about it, then I shall consider the matter as absolutely settled.
You will have a charming mother-in-law indeed. And of course, she will wish to move in with you both dependently, without delay.
The following morning, back in the drawing room, the Bennet household was full of high spirits and chatter about the dance. Whilst it was generally evident that Mr. Bingley much admired Jane, to Elizabeth it was equally evident that Jane was yielding to the preference.
What did you think of him?
He never took his eyes from you.
He's just what a young man ought to be. Sensible, good-humoured, and lively.
He is also good looking, which every young man ought to be if he possibly can.
I'm very much flattered by his asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment.
What could be more natural
manners are not equal to his, I fear.
Miss Bingley is a very pleasing woman when you converse with her. She's to live with her brother and keep his house. I think we shall find her a very charming neighbour.
Dear Jane, you never see a fault in anybody, all the while good and agreeable in your eyes.
I wish not to be hasty in censuring anyone. But if only Mamma was...
I noted that we cannot change Mamma. She will always be the same.
Oh, Lizzie dear, here's your friend Charlotte.
Hello, Charlotte. Nice of you to come over.
I promised a card baked in fire and nothing to do but that I try the recipe your cook uses.
Yeah, cook will be flattered.
How is Lady Lucas this morning?
I trust you enjoyed the dance yesterday evening.
Very much so, thank you, Mrs. Bennet.
You began the evening well, Charlotte. You were Mr. Bingley's first choice.
Yes, but he seemed to like the second better.
Oh, you mean Jane, I suppose, because he danced with her twice. Oh, well, to be sure, that does seem as if he admired her. I overheard Mr. Robinson asking Mr. Bingley which of the ladies present he thought the prettiest, and he said that he thought the elder Miss Bennet, beyond a doubt. Oh, well, that was very decided, to be sure. Oh, that does sound as if...
Oh, but if they all come to nothing, of course.
Hello, Mary. Greeting again.
Hello, Charlotte.
Mr. Darcy's not so well worth listening to as his friend, is he?
Poor Eliza, to be only just tolerable. He's such a proud, disagreeable man. It would be quite a misfortune to be liked by him.
Pride is a very common failing, and there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency or some quality or other, real or imaginary.
He sat close to Mrs. Long for half an hour without
Once opening his lips.
Miss Bingley told me that he never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances. With them, he's remarkably agreeable.
Oh, it does not follow that a person who is not loquacious is of necessity agreeable. I could quote many instances.
Though perhaps later, dear. Another time I would not dance with him if I were you, Lizzie.
I believe, Mamma, I may safely promise you never to dance with him.
One cannot wonder why so very fine a young man, with family fortune and everything in his favour, should think highly of himself. If I may so express it, I think he has a right to be proud.
Well, that is very true, and I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine.
Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves. Vanity is what we would have others think of us.
Well, I must go and speak to Mr. Bennet. Jane, be sure and have cook to get the recipe ready for Charlotte, will you?
Oh, don't hurry away, Charlotte. I want to talk to you about the ball. Everybody's saying how much attention Mr. Bingley paid Jane.
It did seem as if you admired her.
Was Jane happy?
Very happy, but you know how she is.
So composed that a man would find it hard to get her real feelings.
It's a mistake for a woman to conceal her affection with too much skill. Mr. Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she doesn't encourage him.
Well, she does encourage him as much as her nature will allow. If a woman is partial to a man, then he must find it out.
In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better show more affection than she feels. The time to fall in love is after she is sure of him.
Not Jane. Her love knows no design.
Oh, yes, indeed.
We met Mr. Wickham in front of the library and she offered to escort us home. You can imagine how the other girl don't. Now it's fun to have everybody looking at us.
I fear, Miss Elizabeth, I'll not envy you overmuch. In vain I have often entreated to take a walk with me.
Indeed, sir, I have not refused you out of intent, but only because I was occupied at the time. I am never too busy to go walking with a handsome man in a red coat.
We must have a mile with the news to Meryton while that's a bit of gossip.
Won't you sit down, Fiona?
Thank you, no, I must be leaving soon.
You missed you at the ball.
Unfortunately, business in the city took me away at just that time. Not that I have any wish to avoid Mr. Darcy. In fact, it's the other way round.
Of course.
La 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 la. La 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 la.
Mary is practicing again.
La 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 la
I have
la.
mind to walk with you a little way, since you teased me about refusing your invitation.
be on my way.
Miss Lucas, Miss Bennet.
Oh, how nice to see you again, Mr. Wickham.
Charlotte is just on her way home to do some baking. My girl's never allowed in the kitchen, of course, but I'm sure your dear mother knows what is best for you.
Charlotte is very clever, and I envy her.
Thank you, dear Lizzie.
Oh, Elizabeth has such a sympathetic nature.
Come, we'll walk with you through the garden.
Goodbye, Mrs. Bennet.
Mr. Bennet? Mrs. Bennet?
Oh, Elizabeth, here you are. Oh, we've been discussing our most delightful evening at the most excellent ball. Oh, Jane was so admired. Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful. Oh, I was so vexed when he stood up with Charlotte Lucas for the first dance, and he asked Jane for the second. And the third he danced with, with Miss King, then the fourth with Maria Lucas, the fifth with Jane again, and the sixth.
Oh, say no more of his partners. Would he sprain his ankle in the first dance?
Did you think Mr. Bingley very handsome?
Oh, terribly so. But not as handsome as the officers from Meryton who danced with me. Such eyes, such moustaches.
We must always remember that beneath the mask of beauty may lie unknown vices and ungodliness.
I'm of the opinion that Kitty and Lily must be two of the silliest girls in the country.
I dare say when they get to our age, my dear, they won't think of the officers any more than we do.
A servant has just arrived with this note.
Thank you, Hill.
It's for Miss Jane from Netherfield Park.
Jane? Oh, well, look, hang on, dear, it's up, look quickly. Is it wrong? What is it about? What's it say, dear?
It is from Miss Bingley. My dear friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine today with Louisa and me, we shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives. For a whole day's tete-a-tete between two women can never end without a quarrel. Come as soon as you can, on the seat of this. My brother and the gentleman are to dine with the officers. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley.
Mr. Bingley is to dine out. Oh, that is very unlucky.
The officers? Why, not just that. The servant is awaiting our reply, madam.
Well, tell him to convey Miss Jane's warmest thanks and say that she will set out shortly.
Yes, madam.
Can I have a carriage, Mamma? Oh, dear, I think it's better if you went on horseback.
I'd much rather go in the coach.
Oh, no, I'm afraid your father cannot spare the
Oh,
horse.
but my dear, I'm sure...
No, I think it's better if you went on horseback because, you see, it's very likely to rain. Maybe you'll have to stay all night, dear. Now, remember, when you get to Netherfield, you must go find the house.
Mrs. Bennet's hopes were answered. Jane had not been gone long before it rained hard. Her sisters were uneasy for her, but her mother was delighted. The rain continued the whole evening without intermission, and Jane certainly could not come back that night. Breakfast was scarcely over when a servant from Netherfield arrived.
Well, this was a good idea of mine indeed.
There's a note arrived from Netherfield. Can you see this?
Well, come along and see it up to us quickly.
It's from Jane.
My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suppose is to be imputed to my getting wet through yesterday. Excepting a sore throat and headache, there is not much the matter with me, but my kind friends will not hear of my returning home till I am better.
Well, my dear, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness, and if she should die, it would be a comfort to know it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders.
Don't make them die. People do not die of trifling little colds. No, she will be taken good care of. As long as she stays there, all will be well.
I know that Father cannot spare the horses, so I shall walk to Netherfield to see Jane. It is only 3 miles, and I will be back by dinner.
But how can you be so silly as to think of such a thing in all this dirt? You won't be fit to be seen when you get there.
I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want.
Oh!
I admire the activity of your benevolence, but every impulse of feeling should be guided
down to Meryton with you? If we make haste, perhaps we may see something of Captain Carter before he goes.
After she had left Lydia and Kitty in Meryton, Elizabeth walked the remaining 2 miles to Netherfield at a quick pace. When she came in view of the house, it was with weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing with the warmth of the exercise. She was greeted very politely. Jane was very feverish and not well enough to leave her room. When Jane became concerned about Elizabeth's leaving, her sister was invited to stay for the night. Later that evening, when she was upstairs with Jane, the conversation downstairs turned to Elizabeth.
Well, I believe Miss Elizabeth's manners are very bad indeed. She has no conversation, no style, no taste, and no beauty.
Oh, I agree. In fact, she has nothing to recommend her, except that of being an excellent walker. I shall never forget her appearance this morning. She looked almost white.
She did indeed, Louisa. Very nonsensical to come at all. Why must she be scampering about the country because her sister has a cold? Her hair's so untidy.
I hope you noticed her gown. 6 inches deep in mud.
This was all lost upon me. I thought she looked remarkably well when she came into the room this morning. A dirty gown quite escaped my notice.
You observed it, I'm sure, Mr. Darcy, and I'm inclined to believe that you would not wish your sister to make such an exhibition.
Certainly not. Shows an affection for her sister. Very pleasing.
I'm afraid, Mr. Darcy, that this little adventure has rather affected your admiration of her fine eyes.
Not at all. They were brightened by the exercise.
I have an excessive regard for Miss Jane Bennet. Now, she really is a very sweet girl, and I wish with all my heart that she were well settled.
But with such a father and mother, and such low connections, I fear there is no chance of it.
Indeed.
And how is the patient?
She has fallen asleep at last.
That is a comfort. Please join us. Would you care for a hand of cards?
No, I may be required to attend to my sister again in a short while. I will amuse myself with a book.
Eliza Bennet despises this card. She's a very great reader and has no pleasure in anything else.
I deserve neither such praise nor such censure. I am not a great reader, and I have pleasure in many things.
In nursing your sister, I am sure you have pleasure. And I hope it will soon be increased by seeing her quite well.
Thank you. That is so very kind.
Oh, let me bring you others. I'm an idle fellow, and though I have not many books, I have more than I ever look into.
No, really, I can suit myself perfectly with those here.
What a delightful library. You have a Pemberley, Mr. Darcy.
It ought to be good. It has been the work of many generations.
Is Miss Georgiana Darcy much grown since the spring? Will she be as tall as I am?
I think she will.
I never met anyone who delighted me so much. Such countenance, such manners, and so very well accomplished for her age.
It's amazing to me how young ladies have the patience to be so very accomplished as they are. Never heard of a young lady spoken of for the first time without being informed that she was very accomplished.
I cannot boast of knowing any more than half a dozen that are truly accomplished. Unless you include those ladies whose skills include netting a purse, painting tables, covering screens.
Then you must comprehend a great deal in your idea of an accomplished woman.
Certainly. She must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word.
And to all this, she must yet add something more substantial. In the improvement of her mind, by extensive reading.
I am no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder now at you knowing any. And now you will excuse me, I must see if my sister requires anything.
Eliza Bennet is one of those young ladies who seeks to recommend herself to the other sex by undervaluing her own. In my opinion, that is a very paltry, mean device.
There is meanness in all the arts which ladies sometimes employ for captivation.
In the morning, Mrs. Bennet set off for Netherfield with Lydia and Kitty. that the illness was not serious, but she had no desire for a speedy recovery, as this might remove Jane from Netherfield.
I trust, Mrs. Bennet, you've not found Miss Jane worse than you expected.
Oh, indeed I have, sir. I'm afraid she's a great deal too ill to be moved.
Removed? Must not be thought of.
Oh, if it was not for such good friends, I do not know what would become of her. Oh, she suffers a vast deal, but she bears it with the greatest patience in the world, for she has the sweetest temper I ever met with. I often tell my other girls they have nothing on her. Yes, what a charming room you have here at Netherfield, Mr. Bingley. I know no other place in the country that is quite its equal. And I do hope you will not think of quitting it in a hurry, although you do have a short leave.
Whatever I do is done in a hurry. Should I resolve to quit Netherfield, I should probably be off in 5 minutes. At present, however, I consider myself quite fixed here.
That is exactly what I should have supposed of you.
You begin to comprehend me, do you? You so easily seem very pitiful.
Oh yes, I understand you perfectly, Mr. Bingley. But do not take offence, for it does not necessarily follow that the deep, intricate characters are more or less estimable than yours.
Remember where you were, Missy, and do not dwell on in that wild manner that you are suffered to do at home.
I did not know that you were a study of character. Must be an amusing study.
Yes, but the intricate characters are most amusing. They have at least that advantage.
The country can in general supply but few subjects for such study. In a country neighbourhood you move in a very confined and unvarying society.
But people themselves alter so much that there is always something new to be observed in them.
Yes, I can assure you there is quite as much of that going on in the country as there is in the town. I cannot see that London has any great advantage over the country.
I can be equally happy in either town or country.
Well, that's because you have the great disposition, Mr. Bingley. But that gentleman there seemed to think the country was nothing at all.
Mamma, you are mistaken. Mr. Darcy simply meant that there wasn't the variety of people to be met with in the country as in the town. Now tell me, Mamma, has Charlotte been to Longbourn since I've been gone?
Oh, yes, dear, yes. She called yesterday with her father. Now, there is an agreeable man, always something pleasant to say to everybody. And those persons that consider themselves too important and never open their mouths quite mistake the matter. It is a pity that the Lucas girls are not handsome. And not that I consider Charlotte to be particularly plain, but then she is our special friend.
She seems a very pleasant young woman.
Oh, yes, she is, but you must confess she is very plain. And Lady Lucas has often said so herself, and that they may be really Jane's beauty. Oh, I don't like to boast of my own child, but it's not often one sees somebody better looking. It's what everybody says.
And they are quite right.
Mr. Bingley, do you remember you promised to give a ball here at Netherfield?
I am perfectly ready, I assure you, to keep my promise. But you would not wish it to be while your sister is so ill.
Oh, no. Much better to wait until Jane is well again.
And by that time, Captain Carter will be back at Meryton, will he not, Lydia?
And now I feel we must return to Longbourn in the certain knowledge that Jane is in the best possible hands, and with her dear sister. Come along, Lily.
Bye, Bye.
Later that evening, Elizabeth tended to Jane until she fell asleep, and then returned to the drawing room with some needlework. Mr. Darcy was absorbed in writing a letter to his young sister, Georgiana.
How delighted Miss Darcy will be to receive such a letter. Pray, tell your sister how delighted I am to hear of her improvement on the harp, and that I am quite in raptures over her design for a beautiful table.
Will you give me leave to defer your raptures until I write again? I have no room left to do them justice.
Do you always write such long letters, Mr. Darcy?
Ah, but he does not write with ease. He studies too much for words with 4 syllables.
My style of writing is very different from yours.
Charles writes in the most careless way imaginable. He leaves out half his words and blots the rest.
My ideas flow so rapidly, I've not the time to express them. which means my letters sometimes convey no ideas at all.
There. It is finished.
I remember when we first knew Miss Elizabeth, how amazed we all were to find that she were a reputed beauty. And I particularly recollect your saying one night, she, a beauty, I'd as soon as call her mother a wit.
Yes, but that was when I first knew her. For it is some time since I have considered her one of the handsomest women of my acquaintance.
Well, I hope you will give your mother-in-law a few hints, once this desirable event has taken place, as to the advantage of holding her tongue. To cure the younger girls running off to the officers.
And, if I may mention so delicate a subject, endeavour to check that certain something, bordering on conceit and impertinence that your lady possesses.
And do not have her picture painted. Why, what artist could do justice to those beautiful eyes?
It would not be easy indeed to capture their expression. But the colour and shape and the eyelashes so remarkably fine might be copied. Indeed, I swear that...
How is the patient? No worse, I trust.
She sleeps soundly and her fever seems to have abated.
That is most excellent news.
By the by, Charles, are you really serious in meditating a ball here at Netherfield? There are some among us to whom a dance would be more of a punishment than a pleasure.
If you mean Mr. Darcy, he may go to bed before it begins if he chooses. As for the ball, it is quite settled.
I should like balls infinitely better if conversation and not dancing were made the order of the day.
Much more rational, my dear Caroline. But it would not be near so much like a ball.
And now, Miss Eliza Bennet, let me persuade you to take a turn about the room. I assure you it is quite refreshing after sitting so long in one attitude.
Very well, Miss Bingley.
Will you not join us, Mr. Darcy?
I can imagine but two reasons for choosing to walk up and down the room together. Either you have secret affairs to discuss, or because you are conscious that your figures appear to their greatest advantage while walking. If the first, I would be in your way. And if the second, I can admire you much better as I sit here.
How shall we punish him for making such a speech?
Tease him. Laugh at him.
No, I think you may defy us there.
Mr. Darcy is not to be laughed at. It would be a great misfortune to me to have many such acquaintances. I dearly love to laugh.
It has been the study of my life to avoid those weaknesses which often expose one to ridicule.
Such as vanity or pride.
Vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is a clear superiority of mind, will always be under good regulation.
Then it seems, Mr. Darcy, as if you are without fault.
Not at all. I have faults enough, but they are not of understanding. My temper I dare not vouch for. I cannot forget the follies and vices of others as soon as I ought, nor their offences against myself. My good opinion once lost is lost forever.
That is a failing indeed. However, you have chosen your fault well. I cannot laugh at you. You are safe from this.
There is in every disposition a tendency towards a natural defect, which not even the finest education can overcome.
And yours is a propensity to hate everyone.
And yours is to willfully misunderstand them.
In due course, Jane and Elizabeth returned home. They were not welcomed very cordially by their mother, who was hoping for Jane's stay to last until her attachment to Mr. Bingley could be assured. However, their father was delighted to see them.
Miss Jane and Miss Elizabeth are back, matters.
Soon! Why so soon?
drive us home.
Well, do not disturb him if he is occupied. We can't stay long.
Oh, my dear, dear friends, how kind you've been to poor Jane.
The kindness was on Miss Jane's side.
We have found a very pleasant company.
Thank you.
Are you ready to go now, Charles?
Oh, so soon.
Jane, dear, did Mr. Bingley not once express a wish to see our garden? Mamma?
I did, madam. Will you show it to me, Miss Jane?
Yes, of course you will. And we can have a nice little chat, can't we?
Do you mind if I see the garden also?
And I should like to see it too.
And you, Mr. Darcy?
Thank you. I shall remain here.
Well, just a short time as you've been so unwell, dear.
Wait for us, Charles.
Are you a great reader, Mr. Darcy?
Yes, madam.
Quite a pleasant day, isn't it?
Was?
Will you be staying long at Netherfield?
I cannot say.
Well, if you will excuse me, I shall leave you to your reading.
Certainly, madam.
My father expresses his gratitude for the care given to Jane.
It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy.
You might like to make a remark about the weather.
Consider it may.
One must speak a little, you know.
And sometimes the less said, the better.
Nevertheless, I should
Introduce the next topic.
I had an interesting conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham has a way of making friends. Whether he may be equally capable of retaining them is less certain.
He has been so unlucky
He is to lose your friendship, Mr. Darcy, and through no fault of his own.
Miss Bennet, do not judge my character when you know so little about him.
I have seen and heard enough.
Then let us drop the subject for the moment.
A delightful garden.
It's small, but we enjoy it.
I'm sorry that we must leave so soon.
We hope you shall come again.
Thank you.
You may depend on it.
Oh, dear Jane has so enjoyed her visit.
We have enjoyed having her. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
My dear, the way he smiled at you. Come along, you may tell Mamma all about it.
My dear, I hope you've ordered a good dinner for today. I have reason to expect an addition to our family party.
Who do you mean?
The person who I refer to is a gentleman and a stranger who I never saw before in my life.
If you have never seen him before, how do you know he is coming?
Your father speaks in riddles, dear. Perhaps it affects my poor nerves.
You will observe, my dear, I have a letter.
You had a letter?
You gave me no chance to mention it earlier. It came a fortnight ago and I've already answered it. It is from my cousin, Mr. Collins.
Oh, that only is man. Oh, Mr. Collins, indeed. Oh, can't you wait until you're dead before telling us all over this house? Oh, I think it's preposterous that your father should have decreed in his will that our house should not be inherited by our children if there be no male heirs. Oh, and it should all go to that odious man. Oh.
My dear, nothing we can do will keep Mr. Collins from inheriting Longbourn when I die.
I do think it the hardest thing in the world that your estate should be entailed away from your own children.
It is the law.
No, I can't bear to think about it.
When you hear what he has to say, you may feel a little softened towards him.
Oh, I don't suppose I shall. I think it was very impertinent of me to write to him at all.
For one thing, he has received his ordination.
Oh, a clergyman.
And that he's been appointed to a rectory by the patronage of the Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Whoever she may be.
At any rate, he's coming here today for a fortnight's visit.
Am I supposed to make him welcome?
Well, judge for yourself by this line. I cannot be otherwise than concerned at being the means of injuring your amiable daughters.
So glad he realises it.
And beg leave to apologise for it, as well as to assure you of my readiness to make them every possible amends.
Oh, well, if he is disposed to make any amends, I shall not be the person to discourage him.
Mr. William Collins, ma'am.
Oh, show him in, Hill.
Yes,
Hill! Then bring the tea at once.
certainly, madam.
Hill! Tell Miss Mary to come downstairs immediately.
Yes, madam.
Mary makes such a good impression on visitors. She's so very intelligent. Oh, I hope we'll
My good sir, I hope I trust I do not intrude upon your good lady by my visit.
Not at all. Allow me to present my good lady.
I am honoured.
Our cousin, Mr. Collins. My eldest daughter, Miss Jane. My second daughter, Miss Elizabeth.
I am delighted to make your acquaintance.
Thank you. Won't you sit down, Mr. Collins?
Thank you.
I trust you had a pleasant journey.
Very pleasant, thank you. I am looking forward to meeting your other daughters, for I have heard much of their beauty.
How nice of you to say so.
In the case of Miss Jane, fame has fallen short of
Oh, well, it's what everybody says.
I do not doubt that in due time you'll see them all well disposed to marry.
Oh, well, I do hope so with all my heart, or else they will be destitute enough. Things are settled so oddly.
My dear, let us not go into that.
You allude perhaps to the entail of this estate.
Oh, I do indeed. You must agree it is a grievous affair to my poor girls.
Quite right, and I
It
was
will not
thinking.
have me to find fault with you, of course.
I am very sensible, madam, of the hardship to my fair cousins, but I can assure you I come here prepared to admire them. Yes.
Shall Jane and I oblige you by making sure that Mr. Collins' room is in readiness?
Oh, yes, dear, I wish you would. Yes.
As I said, I came here prepared to admire your daughters. My patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, has condescended to advise me that a clergyman such as myself needs a wife.
Oh, Mr. Collins.
And it is my hope that a mistress for my home may be found here at Longbourn.
So that is what you meant by making amends?
It is, my dear.
Oh, what a compliment to our girls, Mr. Bennet. Well, as to my younger daughters, I can't take it upon me to say, but I don't know of any prepossession.
And as for Miss Jane?
Oh, I feel it incumbent on me to hint that Miss Jane is very likely to be soon engaged.
I see. In point of seniority, Miss Elizabeth is next.
Oh, she's quite unattached.
A very charming young lady. I am cautious of appearing forward and precipitous. At present I will say no more, but perhaps when we are better acquainted.
Mr. Collins.
Since I am assured that my welcome is cordial, I will instruct your man to bring in my bag.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, did you hear? What's the matter? What about girls?
Yes, I still have my hearing.
Let's see. And Mr. Bingley is so taken with Jane. Elizabeth would be the perfect choice for Mr. Collins.
Madam, you're as silly as your daughters.
I'm astonished you can think any of them silly. I think they're all very clever. Oh, yeah, I can hardly believe it. Two of my daughters practically
best efforts to avoid it, Lizzie was obliged to take her first 2 dances with Mr. Collins. As she expected, he was a solemn and awkward partner, often moving wrongly without being aware of it.
You observe Mr. Collins when he danced with me. He spent most of his time apologising rather than attending.
Will you allow me the honour of requesting your hand for the next dance?
Thank you, Mr. Darcy.
Until the next dance, Miss Bennet.
Whatever possessed me to accept his invitation? I vowed not to dance with him.
I fear I was taken by surprise.
I dare say you'll find him very agreeable.
Heaven forbid. That would be the greatest misfortune of all. To find a man agreeable
Whom one was determined to hate.
Don't allow your fancies into the women to make you appear unpleasant in the eyes of a man 2 times his consequence.
Lady Lucas, a approachable young man, one could not hope to meet. I can assure you, I will see my dear daughter Jane settled and married very, very shortly. In fact, subject to the necessary settlements for new wedding clothes and new carriages, I'm sure I shall see her settled at Wakefield. Oh, yes, in the next 3 months. So soon. You must be very proud. Oh, yes, Mr. Bingley is such a charming man. And so rich. And he lives but 3 miles from us.
Oh, a blessing indeed.
Oh, and it is a comfort to think how fond his 2 sisters are of dear Jane. I'm sure they must desire the connection just as much as we do. Of course, it's such a promising thing for my younger daughters. It will throw them in the way of other rich men, too. You know, I had not thought of that. And also, I must confide, I do feel my dear Lizzie is closer to being settled than not. You see, Mr. Collins, when he arrived at Longbourn the other day, he made an approach to me. Oh, it was very charming. Oh, excuse me. Hello.
This is one of my favourite dances, Mr. Darcy. Is it yours?
It is tolerable, Miss Bennet.
Ah, a reply. That will do for now. And now we may be silent.
Do you talk by rule then, while you are dancing?
Sometimes.
And are you consulting your own feelings in the present case, or do you imagine you are gratifying mine?
Both. But I have always seen a great similarity in the turn of our minds. We are each of them in social and taciturn disposition, and only speak when we wish to amaze the room.
That is a remarkable assessment of your own character, I am sure. How near it made it to mine, I cannot pretend to say.
It appears that our mutual acquaintance Mr. Wickham is not in attendance tonight.
Am I to understand
That the courtesy of an invitation has not been extended to him.
You must believe as you choose.
We have been so unfortunate as to lose your friendship, Mr. Darcy, and in a manner which he is likely to suffer from all his life.
Your servant, Miss Bennet.
So, Miss Eliza Bennet, I hear you are quite delighted with George Wickham. However, has he informed you that he is the son of the late Mr. Darcy's steward? Let me advise you, Miss Bennet, as a friend, not to give implicit confidence to all his assertions. As to Mr. Darcy treating him ill, it is perfectly false.
On the contrary, he has always treated him with remarkable kindness, even though George Wickham has treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner.
I pity you, Miss Bennet, for this discovery of your favourite's guilt.
He has informed me of his parenthood, Miss Bingley, and I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than being a steward's son.
I beg your pardon. Excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
What have you learned of Mr. Wickham?
Mrs. Bingley understands that Mr. Wickham is by no means a respectable young man. He's been very imprudent and deserved to lose Mr. Darcy's regard. He will, however, vouch for Mr. Darcy's good conduct, probity, and honour. As for the living, it appears it is left to Mr. Wickham conditionally only.
I have been so fortunate as to make a most important discovery. There is now in this house a near relation of my patroness. Who would have thought of my meeting with a nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh in business? I am now going to seek him out to pay my respects.
You're not going to introduce yourself to Mr. Darcy?
Indeed I am.
I should have advised you not to do so. Mr. Collins, Mr. Darcy might consider your addressing him without an introduction as an impertinence. You see, there's a code of manners that dictates.
Before the evening was out, Mrs. Bennet, in a most subtle manner, had advised anyone who was prepared to listen that her daughter Jane would be marrying very shortly. Indeed, carried away by the thoughts of matrimony, she convinced herself of having her second daughter almost married and her future at Longbourn secure.
Your move, Mr. Collins.
Yes, I was just contemplating.
Your move, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins.
Quite possible from a small garden. My humble abode is separated only by a lane from Rosings Park, Lady Catherine's residence, where there is a veritable profusion of bloom.
Oh, I dare say Lady Catherine's a very agreeable woman.
She is thought to be proud by many, but I have never seen anything but affability in her.
Your move.
I believe you said she was a widow, sir. Does she have any family?
She has only one daughter, the heiress of Rosing.
What kind of young lady is she? Is she handsome?
A very charming young lady.
Your move.
Unfortunately, of a sickly constitution.
Has she been presented at court?
Her indifferent state of health unfortunately prevents that. As I ventured to say to Lady Catherine myself, the British court is deprived of its brightest ornament.
Your move.
Her ladyship seemed pleased with the idea.
You will observe, Mr. Collins, I have your last king in the corner.
Yes, a trivial game.
If you'll excuse me, I shall spend a little time in my library.
I had hoped that your daughters would gather in here this morning while I read aloud from this elevating volume, Fordyce's Sermons to Young Women.
Oh, the girls would have loved it, but I'm afraid they're out.
May I hope, madam, for the honour of a private audience with Miss Elizabeth this morning?
Oh, yes, certainly. Oh, she's a very good girl, Mr. Collins, a very good girl. I'm sure Lizzie will be very happy to hear anything you have to say to her.
In that case, would you be so kind as to let me know when Miss Elizabeth returns?
Oh, yes, Mrs. Collins, I will send her to you as soon as she comes in. Leanne. Mr. Bennet! Mr. Bennet!
Go away.
Oh,
modesty.
Lizzie, I insist upon you staying and hearing Mr. Collins.
Believe me, Miss Elizabeth, your modesty adds to your other perfections. You would have been less amiable in my eyes had it not been for this little unwillingness. May I assure you that I do have your respected mother's permission for this address?
You have?
Almost as soon as I entered this house, I singled you out as the companion of my future life. But before I am carried away with my feelings in this matter, I will state my reasons for coming here expressly to select why. First, I think it is the right thing for a clergyman to set the example of matrimony in his parish. Secondly, I am convinced that it will add greatly to my happiness. And thirdly, that it is the advice and recommendation of that very noble lady whom I have the honour of calling patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who has twice condescended to give me her opinion on the subject, unasked. Mr. Collins, a clergyman such as yourself must marry, she said to me. Choose a gentlewoman, a useful, active sort of a person, not brought up too high, but able to make a small income go a good way. The fact is that, being as I am, inherit this estate after the death of your honoured father, I could not satisfy myself without resolving to choose a wife from among his daughters, that the loss would affect them as little as possible when that melancholy event takes place. Now, allow me to assure you that I am well aware that £1,000 with 4% is all you may expect upon the death of your honoured mother, but allow me to assure you that I will never reproach you on that score. And now, nothing remains for me but to assure you of the violence of my affection.
You are too hasty, sir. Accept my thanks for the compliment you are paying me, but I must decline.
Ah, I know it is usual for a young lady to reject the addresses of the man whom she secretly means to accept, when all the while her heart is fluttering with wild fancy.
My word, sir, you are a hard man to discourage.
I shall lead you to the altar ere long.
But I am perfectly serious in my refusal. You could not make me happy, and I am the last woman in the world who would make you so.
My dear Elizabeth.
Were your friend Lady Catherine to know me, I'm sure she would find me in every respect ill-qualified for the situation.
Ah, it is your wish to increase my love by suspense, as most elegant females do. I beg of you, hold me off no longer. Confess your love.
Really, Mr. Collins, may I speak plainer? I am no elegant female out to plague you. I am a rational creature speaking the truth from my heart.
You are charming, Miss Elizabeth, most adorable of creatures. We might...
Oh, Mr. Collins, you are mad, quite mad!
Miss Elizabeth!
Spare us for your congratulations, Mamma. I have declined Mr. Collins's generous offer.
Lizzie, come back here at once! Come back here! Oh, depend upon it, she shall be brought to reason.
She seems very definite.
Oh, she's a very headstrong, foolish girl.
Headstrong or foolish?
She takes after her father in that respect. Oh, but depend upon it, I shall bring the stubborn girl to reason.
Perhaps stubborn too. Perhaps if she has such defects of temper, perhaps it would be better not to force her into accepting me.
No, Mr. Collins, you misunderstand me. Oh, no, it's only a matter such as these that Lizzie tends to be a little headstrong. In everything else, she's the sweetest girl that
about time, my dear Lizzie Bennet.
What now?
Oh, we're in an uproar. You must make Lizzie marry Mr. Collins.
What are you talking about?
Lizzie's declaration will not have Mr. Collins, and now Mr. Collins begins to say it will not have Lizzie.
Where is Elizabeth?
In the garden.
Elizabeth! Come here directly.
Tell her that you insist upon her marrying him.
Yes, Father?
I understand Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage.
He has. Tell her that I insist upon her accepting it, or I will never see her again.
An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day on, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. If you do not marry your mother will never see you again. If you do not marry Mr. Collins, I will never see you again if you
I tell you, Mary, nobody feels for my poor nerves.
Yes, Ma.
How cruelly used. Nobody cares for my feelings.
Yes, Ma. No, Ma.
I thought you at least might understand how I was feeling.
Yes, Ma.
Mr. Collins has been acting so strangely since he returned from visiting the Luces. I do fear Charlotte was setting her cap for him now.
Charlotte is not artful.
Oh, Charlotte is 27 and must feel quite desperate. When my daughters have reached that age and still have no likelihood of a suitable marriage, I don't know what I should do. Oh, look, there she is, looking as unconcerned as ever. Please, Mamma, don't continue to play Lizzie. I tell you, Miss Lizzie, if you go taking it into your eye to refuse every offer of marriage in this way, you will never get a husband.
Do I seem concerned?
I won't be able to keep you when your father is dead. Don't you think you've talked about it enough? Oh, if Lizzie doesn't care for Mr. Collins, then that is the end of it. I shan't say no word about it. But if Charlotte Lucas marries Mr. Collins, you will never be my bride when your poor father dies. Oh, please. Oh, well, at least I can console myself that you have found favour with Mr. Bingley. Do you think he will declare himself soon? I have done all I could to encourage him.
Now you are embarrassing Jane. A note has just been delivered from Netherfield, Matt. Oh, wow.
Okay, don't read it out to us quickly. Where's it from? Oh, Miss Bingley, I dare say. What elegant paper she uses.
It is from Miss Bingley. If you'll excuse me, I'll retire to my room.
Oh, lovely.
Darcy is at the back of this.
Oh, you wouldn't dare.
He has. He and Miss Bingley between them.
Oh, Mamma, the most exciting thing. What regiment has been ordered to Brighton? Oh, at last. Now one may take a walk into Meryton without stumbling over an officer. How joke about, oh, poor little Kitty. Oh, well, do I remember how I cried the 3 days when Colonel Miller's regiment was sent away. I thought I should have broken my heart. I'm sure it would break my heart.
How come you are so gentle, Lydia?
She has nothing to cry about. Oh, if her father would let us all go to Brighton for the summer.
I'll never agree. Come, Lydia, out with the news you're bursting with. Colonel Forster's wife has invited me to visit with her there.
Oh, Lydia, she did!
She said a little sea air is just what I needed.
Do me a great deal of good,
Oh,
sir.
it is me she invited.
I can't show Mrs. Forster should not invite me as well as Lydia.
Come, dry your eyes and help me look over my clothes. I shall need at least 2 new bonnets.
Oh, Lydia, your new gown with the elegant white balls. But I do think we need to put a little more lace on it. Oh, yeah.
What is all to do about this time?
The regiment has been ordered to Brighton, and Mrs. Forster has invited Lydia to visit her there. I must have yards and yards of lace. Yes, Daddy.
I don't remember hearing anybody ask my permission to this trip.
Ah, please do not let her go.
Why not?
You are as aware as I of all the improprieties of
Lydia's behaviour. There could be little advantage had from the friendship of such a woman as Mrs. Forster. And Lydia is likely to be more imprudent with such a young companion at Brighton, where the temptations must be greater than at home.
Lydia will never be happy until she has made a spectre of herself in some place or other. And we can never expect her to do it at so little expense or inconvenience to her family as under the present circumstances.
But her manner is so unguarded and immoderate.
You exaggerate, my dear. Foolish she undoubtedly is, but scarcely out of hand.
Pa, please may I speak plainer? If you, dear father, do not check her exuberant spirit,
Her character will be fixed. And she will at 16 be the most determined little flirt that ever made herself and her family ridiculous. Pa, I'm asking you this for her own good.
We shall have no peace at Longbourn if she doesn't go. Colonel Forster is a sensible man and will keep her from any real mischief.
I sincerely hope so.
I shall give her my consent.
Luckily, she's too poor to be an object of praise for anybody.
Charlotte.
And Mr. Collins. What are you doing in the garden?
I have been calling on Sir William and Lady Lucas, and Miss Charlotte kindly consented to return here with me.
I have something very important to tell you, Eliza.
I do hope that for once it is good news.
May I speak with Mr. Bennet?
My father has just retired to the library.
Thank you.
Oh, Charlotte, it is good of you to pass a little time with Mr. Collins. Oh, it keeps him in a good humour, and I'm more obliged to you than I can say.
And why should I not? After all, Mr. Collins and I are engaged to be married.
Engaged? To Mr. Collins? Charlotte, impossible.
Not at all.
Charlotte, I didn't mean that. I wish you every happiness.
I'm not unaware, is he, that Mr. Collins asked you for your hand first.
Oh, he did it only out of duty, I'm sure.
I'm not romantic, you know. I require only a comfortable home, and I'm convinced that my chance of happiness with Mr. Collins is as good as most people can hope for.
Of course. Charlotte, do you hope you will be happy?
Will you come to visit when I'm married, Lizzie?
Oh, well, I promise me, Elizabeth. Oh, I promise.
I must go and hear how your mother takes the news.
Oh, Charlotte! Oh, how nice to see you. Oh, this bonnet is adequate, but Mara and I are very troubled more.
with it. And what of Charlotte's engagement? It's unaccountable.
No, Lizzie. Remember that Charlotte is one of the large family but little fortune. She may feel regard and esteem for her cousin.
I can hardly bring myself to think so. Mr. Collins is a conceited, pompous, narrow-minded, silly man, and Charlotte knows that as well as we do.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Bennet. It's very hard to think that Charlotte Lucas will ever be mistress of this house.
Lydia is waiting for you in the garden, there.
Come on, Jane. I'll be forced to make way for Charlotte Lucas and live to see her take my place here.
My dear, don't give way to such gloomy thoughts. Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I may outlive you. So, Lizzie, your sister Jane is crossed in love, I find. Next to being married, a girl likes to be crossed in love a little now and then. It gives her a sort of distinction amongst her companions. When it is your turn, why not let Wickham be your man? He's a pleasant fellow, but jokes you creditably.
Papa, do you not take anything seriously?
I discovered long ago that to survive as a mere man in a household of women, one must see the amusing side of everything.
But you are not laughing at Jane.
No, my dear, I'm not. But it is a comfort to know that whatever may befall any of you, you have an affectionate mother who will always make use of it.
A few weeks later, Charlotte and Mr. Collins were married. Jane went to stay with Mrs. Bennet's brother, Mr. Gardner, and his wife in London. While she was there, she had written to and called on the Bingleys. Mr. Bingley was out of town, and although she left her address, 4 weeks passed without his calling on her. In the meantime, Elizabeth learned that Mr. Wickham had turned his attentions towards an heiress, Miss King. So she decided to keep her promise and go and stay with Charlotte and Mr. Collins at the parsonage at Chelmsford.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet is here, sir.
My dear, dear Miss Elizabeth, pray enter my humble abode. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. My dearest advisor, how nice to see you. You must be quite exhausted after that long journey. Do come sit down and tell me all your news.
You will have the honour of seeing Lady Catherine de Bourgh on the ensuing Sunday at church. She is all affability and condescension, and I doubt not that you will be honoured with some portion of her attention when service is over.
That will indeed be something to look forward to.
Her behaviour towards my dear Charlotte is charming. We dine at Rosings twice a week, and one of her ladyship's carriages is regularly ordered to take us home.
Lady Catherine is a most attentive neighbour.
I anticipate your inclusion in our next invitation, and in the meanwhile, I have had the audacity to invite Lady Catherine to visit us here in my humble abode. My hopes of replying the affirmative have been confirmed, and she will deign to join us shortly. My dear cousin, do not make yourself uneasy about your apparel. Her ladyship will not think the worse of you for being simply dressed. She likes to have the distinction of rank reserved.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. Darcy, is the...
Well, do not keep her ladyship waiting. Show her in. Lady Catherine, how gracious of you to honour our modest home in this manner.
Mr. Collins, Mrs. Collins, my nephew who is visiting with me at present.
Mr. Darcy, I am delighted to see you again. I am most gratified that you have condescended to visit us. So, pray, allow me to introduce my dear cousin, Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Honoured to meet you, Lady Catherine. I have heard so much about you.
For my part, I know very little of you. Come, sit with me. Your father's estate is entailed on Mr. Collins, I believe, Miss Bennet. For your sake, Mr. Collins, I am candidate. But otherwise, I can see no occasion for entailing estates from the female line. It was not thought necessary in my family. How many sisters do you have, Miss Bennet?
I have 4, one elder and 3 younger.
Are any of them likely to be married?
There is no indication of that at present, I believe.
Do you play and sing?
A little.
Then you must let us hear you sometime. Our instrument is a capital one. Do any of your sisters play and sing?
One of them does.
Oh, why did you not all learn? You ought to have learned. Do you draw?
No, not at all.
What, no one?
Not one.
That is very strange. How did that come about? Did your governess leave you, perhaps?
We never had a governess.
What? No governess? How is that possible? Who taught you? Without a governess, you must have been neglected. Oh.
Compared to some families, I believe that we were, but those of us that wished to learn never wanted the means. Those who chose to be idle certainly might.
That is what a governess will prevent. And if I had known your mother, I would have advised her most strenuously to engage one. Oh. Are any of your younger sisters out, Miss Bennet?
Yes, ma'am. All.
All? What? All 5 out at once? The younger ones out before the elder are married?
Oh, I think it would be very hard upon the younger sisters not to have their share of society and amusement,
Just because the elder may not have the means nor inclination to marry early.
How is Georgiana getting on with her playing, Darcy?
Most excellently. I consider her to be most proficient.
Pray tell her from me that she cannot hope to excel unless she practices a great deal.
She practices constantly, madam.
So much the better. It can never be done too much. And if I'd ever learned, I'm sure I would have been a true proficient.
You wish to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, and you praise your sister's talents so highly. But I will not be alarmed if I am asked to play again. There is a stubbornness about me that cannot bear to be frightened at the will of others. My courage always rises in every attempt to intimidate them.
I have had the pleasure of your acquaintance long enough to know that you find great enjoyment in occasionally professing opinions, which in fact are not your own.
Your nephew will paint you a very pretty picture of me and teach you not to believe a word I say. Give me leave to say in politics, though it may appear, that things concerning yourself may come out
that would shock your relatives to hear, were I to retaliate.
Pray tell me, what do you accuse him of?
Prepare yourself for something very dreadful. The first time I met him was at a ball. And you know what he did? He danced only 4 dances, though gentlemen were scarce.
I have no talent for conversing easily with those I had never seen before, and I had not the pleasure of knowing any lady in the assembly beyond my own party.
Surely you know, Miss Bennet, that nobody can ever be introduced in a ballroom.
Mr. Bingley and his sisters were well, I hope, when you left London, Mr. Darcy?
Perfectly so. Thank you.
I understand that Mr. Bingley has not much idea of ever returning to Netherfield again.
It is probable he will spend little of his time there.
Then wouldn't it be better for the neighbourhood that he give up the place entirely?
Well, then it is possible that we may get a settled family there.
I should not be surprised if he were to give it up entirely.
Lady Catherine, may I be so bold as to solicit your opinion on a little watercolour I purchased recently? It is of a very modest nature, of course, as my style.
Yes, quite. But surely it would have been advisable to solicit my opinion before you purchased the picture. However, leave me to the masterpiece. I will study it and give you my opinion.
You are too kind, Lady Catherine. If you would be so kind as to follow me, the watercolour is in the breakfast room.
Come, Darcy. Your advice may also be required.
How do you find Lady Catherine, Charlotte?
As Mr. Collins said, she's the type of woman you cannot regard with too much deference.
When you dine at Rosings, are there many guests?
Sometimes there are, but quite often we dine alone with Lady Catherine and her daughter. However, a few days before you came to stay with us, we met a relative of hers, Colonel Fitzwilliam, the young son of Mr. Darcy's uncle. Oh, my dearest Eliza, I hesitate to continue, but as you're my oldest and dearest friend,
What is it, Charlotte? What's the matter?
Colonel Fitzwilliam told me something, in confidence, which indirectly concerns you. I promise not to impart the knowledge to anybody, but I believe now I must break my promise. It concerns your sister Jane, since Mr. Darcy told Colonel Fitzwilliam that he congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend and the inconvenience of the imprudent marriage. He did not mention a name. He was almost certain that the friend was Mr. Bingley.
Mr. Darcy give a reason for this interference?
It would appear that the main objection was concerning her family.
There can be no objections to Jane herself.
As you know, she is all loveliness and goodness. And anyway, why should Mr. Darcy be the judge? What else did Colonel Fitzwilliam say on the matter?
Nothing further, only what I've told you.
Charming picture.
Your Lady Catherine,
Of course, it was a good credit to the marriage.
Elizabeth had never doubted that Darcy had been instrumental in separating Bingley from Jane, but had always attributed the main design to Mr. Bingley. A few days later, their party was due to visit Rosings, but Elizabeth had a serious headache. She was roused by the sound of a doorbell, and to her utter amazement, Mr. Darcy walked into the room.
I am informed, Miss Bennet, that you are indisposed. I trust it is nothing of a serious nature.
It is but a headache, Mr. Darcy.
In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. I would have declared my love long before now, but I have had to consider the inferiority of your family and fight against an understandable reluctance to insult my family by such an alliance.
You mean you have tried not to love me, Mr. Darcy?
But I could not rid my mind of you, despite all these objections, and my love for you is impossible to overcome. I am aware that there are great differences in our connections, and that there are great disadvantages into marrying into such a family as yours. Nonetheless, I trust the agony I have endured will be rewarded. Miss Bennet, I offer you my hand.
In cases such as this, I believe it is the established mode to offer a sense of obligation for the sentiments avowed, however unequally they may be returned. But I cannot. How dare you speak of my family in this way? I have never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly.
It is because I love you, Miss Elizabeth, that I dare to speak at all, that I dare offend the society of which I am a part.
You are insufferable, Mr. Darcy, to speak of love and offence in the same breath.
And this is all the reply that I may expect.
It is more than you deserve. Do you think I would marry any man that loved me against his will and reason? Do you think any consideration would tempt me to accept a man who has been the means of ruining the happiness of my sister.
I do not understand you.
You dare not understand me. Can you not deny that you have been the means of separating Jane and Mr. Bingley? Can you not deny that you have done it?
I have no wish to deny that I did everything in my power to separate Mr. Bingley from your sister. Towards him, I have been kinder than towards myself.
But they love each other, Mr. Darcy.
What right have you got to take their happiness into your hands? You speak of love.
What can you know about love? From the very beginning of my acquaintance with you.
Your conceit, your arrogance, and your selfish disdain of the feelings of others is evident. Your true character was revealed to me many months ago by Mr. Wickham, whom you have reduced to his present state of poverty by withholding from him the very living which was his right.
I thank you for explaining so fully. My faults, according to this calculation, are heavy indeed.
They are.
But perhaps these offences may have been overlooked. Had not your pride been hurt?
My pride?
Was it not pride that prevented you from accepting my honest confession of the reasons why I could not ask you sooner to be my wife?
You are the last man in the world whom I ever could be prevailed upon to marry.
You have said that's enough, madam. I perfectly comprehend your feelings, and now I'm only to be ashamed of what my own have been. Forgive me for having taken up so much of your time.
When a letter arrived at the parsonage from her uncle, Mr. Gardiner, Lizzie was relieved to find that it provided her with an excuse to quit Hunsford and thereby avoid further incident. Whilst he was at pains to assure her that Jane, who was staying with him, was in the best of health, he stated he felt that Jane would benefit from having her sister with her. Lizzie made her apologies to Charlotte and Mr. Collins immediately. Upon her arrival in London, Lizzie was welcomed warmly, and as soon as they were alone, Lizzie and Jane began to exchange news.
Tell me everything. Did you see Mr. Darcy?
I saw him quite often at Lady Catherine's, and he put himself out to be more agreeable.
Oh?
And he sent me a letter.
Did he make any reference to that strange proposal of his?
Not directly, but he did address both my reasons for refusing him.
What did he say?
He said that it wasn't until the night of the ball that he realised Mr. Bingley's serious attachment to you. As there seemed to be a general expectation of your marriage, he watched you. But mistakenly, he interpreted your poise as indifference, so he acted to preserve his friend.
Lizzie, no.
And old Wickham's inheritance. He claims that it was Mr. Wickham who resolved against taking orders, and resigning all claims to assistance in the church, requested instead a sum of £3,000 so that he could study the law. Upon finding the law an unprofitable study, he reapplied to Mr. Darcy for the surrendered assistance into the clergy, who of course refused. Nothing more was heard of him until last summer, when Mr. Wickham sought out Miss Georgiana Darcy, whose fortune is £30,000. She was persuaded to believe herself in love and to consent to an elopement. She was then but 15. Thankfully, Mr. Darcy was able to intervene and prevent it.
Can this be true?
You know what to believe.
Oh, Lizzie, you really think you did right in refusing him?
You don't blame me for refusing him, do you?
Oh, no, but we thwarted him. That's a terrible thing.
Dear Jane, always thinking of others. Tell me, what's been happening here in London?
Caroline Bingley called only once. I confess I've been entirely deceived in her regard for me.
I suspected as much.
She hints there's an attachment between Mr. Bingley and Miss Darcy, and they expect the announcement any day.
Can't be true. He loved you, Jane. I'm sure of it.
I'm quite resigned to it now.
I may, I would like to turn our attention for a moment to another matter. Mrs. Gardner thought you would like to see a little of the country while you are here, so we have planned a tour of the county of Derbyshire.
I must admit to a particular interest, as I passed some years of my life in a little town there called Langton. Indeed, I've lately learned that some acquaintances remain.
But there are also the celebrated beauties of Matlock, Chatsworth, and the Peak to enjoy.
It sounds splendid, and it is but 5 miles from a residence you may well have both heard of, Mr. Darcy's estate of Pemberley. Indeed, I have an inclination to see the place again.
I am willing, it's scarcely 2 miles out of our way.
My love, should not you like to see a place about which you've heard so much? A place, too, with which so many of your acquaintances are connected.
Wickham passed all his youth there, you know. I'm sure I should be tired of great houses by then. If it were merely a fine house, richly furnished, I should not care about it myself. But the grounds are delightful.
They have some of the finest woods in the country.
Then I can see no real dislike to the scheme.
The night before they were to visit Pemberley, they stayed in a village inn close by. Lizzie, with no little alarm, asked the chambermaid whether the family were down for the summer. A most welcome negative followed, and she was then at leisure to feel a great deal of curiosity to see the house herself. It transpired that Pemberley House was set in a great park of natural beauty. It was a large, handsome stone building backed by a ridge of high wooded hills. Lizzie was delighted. On applying to see the place, they were admitted to the hall and attended by the housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds.
Oh, I believe I've forgotten just how truly magnificent this house is.
There is a genuine elegance to each beautiful object and each piece of fine furniture.
It is certainly a well-proportioned house and handsomely fitted up.
And to think, in this place I might have been mistress.
I understand that Mr. Darcy is absent at this time, Mrs. Reynolds. Is that so?
He is away at the moment, sir, but we expect him tomorrow with a large party of friends.
Oh, do come and look at this picture here. How do you like it?
That's a picture of a young gentleman brought up by my master at his own expense. He's now gone into the army, but I'm afraid he's turned out very wild. And that is my master, and very like him. It was drawn at the same time as the other, about 8 years ago.
It's a handsome face, but Lizzie, you can tell us whether it's like him or not.
Does this young lady know Mr. Darcy?
A little.
And do you not think him a very handsome gentleman, ma'am?
Yes, very handsome.
Oh, I'm sure I know none so handsome. This was my late master's favourite room, and those miniatures are just as they used to be then. Oh, he was very fond of them. That one is of Miss Georgiana, drawn when she was 8 years old.
And is Miss Darcy as handsome as her brother?
Oh, yes. The handsomest young lady that ever was seen, and so accomplished. She plays and sings all day long.
Is your master much at Pemberley in the course of the year?
Oh, not so much as I could wish, sir. But I dare say he may spend half his time here. And Miss Darcy always comes down for the summer months.
If your master would marry, you might see more of him.
Oh, yes, but I do not know when that will be. I do not know who is good enough for him.
It is much to his credit that you should say so.
I say no more than the truth, and what everybody else will say that knows him. I've never had a cross word from him in my life, and I've known him since he was 4 years old.
There are very few people about whom so much can be said. You are lucky to have such a master.
Yes, sir, I know I am. But I have always observed that those that are good-natured good-natured when children are always good-natured when grown up. And he was always the sweetest-tempered, most generous-hearted boy in the world.
Can this be Mr. Darcy?
His father was an excellent man.
Oh, yes, ma'am, indeed he was, and his son will be just like him. The best landlord and the best master. Some people call him proud, but I've never seen anything of it. It's just like he's not like the usual young men yakking away.
In what an amiable light does this place him?
This fine account of Darcy is not quite consistent with his behaviour to poor Wickham.
Perhaps we are deceived.
That doesn't seem very likely. Our authority was too good.
And in the next room, there is an instrument just come down from Miss Georgiana, a present from my master. And that is always the way with him. Whatever will give his sister pleasure is sure to be done in a moment. There is nothing he would not do for her.
Mr. Darcy,
Miss Bennet, I
didn't expect to see you. We understood all the family were from home, or we should never have presumed.
I returned a day early. Forgive me. Your parents are in good health.
Yes, they are very well, sir.
I'm glad to hear it. And how long have you been in this part of the country?
About 2 days, sir.
And where are you staying?
At the inn at Lambton.
Yes, of course. I am just arrived myself. Your parents are in good health. And all your sisters?
Yes, they are all in excellent health, sir.
Do you approve of Pemberley?
Very much. I think there are few who would not approve.
But your good opinion is rarely bestowed, and therefore more worth the earning.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
That Mr. Gardner, the man himself.
Just as handsome as his portrait.
Oh, we must leave here at once.
Oh, yes, of course, if you wish.
I wish we'd never come. What must he think of me?
Was he displeased?
What did he say?
Nothing of any consequence. He inquired after my parents.
As Lydia was still in Brighton and Jane and Elizabeth had been away for several weeks, their return home was eagerly anticipated, especially by Kitty, who was finding it particularly difficult without Lydia to confide in.
These months since Jane and Lizzie went away.
Imagine having to stay with Mrs. Collins.
In my opinion, Mr. Collins has some very erudite thoughts.
Ma, I never quite forgive Lizzie for not marrying him.
Marriage is not the only end of life.
It's the best beginning that I know of. I wish I would write on with Lydia.
Lydia is turning out to be a silly, empty-headed flirt.
So what a time she must be having. Mr. Wickham's escorting her to all the balls. And all I do is simply wait for other people to come home.
Men, as some wise person once observed, are the bottom of all our troubles. Did you say women?
I suppose you'll come, Kitty. It's quite some time since I've had a letter from Lydia.
very glad to have you both back.
Oh, dearie, so are we all. You must have us the news.
How does Charlotte look? Does she seem happy? Let me get my breath for her.
The presence of a mere man may not still the clatter of female tongues, but I think you will speak more freely without me.
Jane, you look tired.
It's nothing. I had the most delightful time in London.
Did Mr. Bingley call on you?
He was very busy. His sister Caroline called.
Once. 1 15-minute call.
Did you say maybe 50 minutes? No.
As beauty is but skin deep, so the converse can apply in multifarious instances. Beneath the plethora of facial disorders may lie untold pulchritude.
Indeed. Aunt Philip still says that Lizzie should have taken this to Collins. But I do not think there would have been any fun in it. What do you say, Mary?
Far be it from me, dear sister, to deprecate such pleasures. Though I confess they would have no charms for me, I should infinitely prefer a book.
Charlotte seems quite contented, and they live very comfortably.
Only hope it will last. What sort of table do they keep? I dare say Charlotte's an excellent manager.
She is.
Suppose they often talk of having Longbourn when your father was dead.
They never mentioned it before me.
Need we go into that again, Mamma?
Oh, I shall send them a word about it. Besides, we've taxed you long enough, Jane. It's time you were out in the sun for a little while.
You're quite right, Mamma.
I find this book most tiresome. It is commonplace and riddled with platitudes. I must endeavour to find another that will give me greater scholastic fulfillment.
Oh, Kitty, go to your room and see if you can twist some stuff. Come on, Jane. You need some colour in your cheeks. Go, make a shawl for your shoulders. It might be a little dark. It will be upstairs. Oh, in that case, Lizzie will get it for you. Mamma, I will not be treated as an invalid. Dear Liz, what is your opinion about this sad business of Jane?
Well, I'm worried about her health.
For my part, I'm determined never again to speak of Mr. Bingley to anybody. He's the most undeserving young man. I don't suppose there's the least chance in the world of her ever getting him now. Not at all. Oh, I know, poor dear Jane will die of a broken heart, and then he'll be sorry for what he's done.
Lady Lucas, madam.
Oh, very well, Hill. Hill! Place Miss Jane's chair and the servant.
Certainly, madam.
Hill! Fix it with pillows for her.
Yes, madam.
Both about Charlotte's marriage again.
She probably just wants to hear of Charlotte as well.
Oh, no, every time she comes here, I know she's looking the place over, wondering just when Mr. Bennet is going to die so that Charlotte can move in. Go, Lady Lucas.
Oh, I'm glad to see you home again, Elizabeth. How did you leave my dear Charlotte and her good husband?
In the very best of health, they sent their warmest regards.
It is such a comfort having a daughter well married. You can't know how happy I am. What a pity young Mr. Bingley doesn't return. Lydia is enjoying herself in Brighton, I trust.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Oh, I see you. Jane, you're looking so pale.
Oh, no, it's nothing to the slightest disposition.
Oh, I hope Lydia is not too much of Mr. Wickham at Brighton. I hear that he left gaming debts of a considerable amount behind him in Meryton.
Gaming debts.
His pleasant countenance isn't all what it seems. They say he's in debt to every tradesman in the place.
How can this be true? I have no idea of this.
Oh, dear me, neither had I. People in Meryton are all turned against him now, though there was a time when they considered Mr. Wickham ill-used by Mr. Darcy.
You mean he had told it generally that Mr. Darcy cheated him out of Never.
It is possible to deceive one's heart for a little while.
He separated you from Mr. Bingley. I could never forgive him that.
Mamma will be upset if I don't go outside. I didn't mean to offend you, Lizzie.
Oh, you could never do that, dear Jane.
You see how Lady Lucas looked at the settee? I have no doubt she's going to advise Charlotte to recover it.
Imagine things, Mamma.
Oh,
Before your nerves give way over trifles, my dear, it's news of great import. Expressed from Colonel Forster in Brighton.
oh, what about Lydia?
She's gone off with Mr. Wickham.
Lydia's married!
No, wait, my dear. You note that Lydia left. It's evident she expected to be married immediately.
From what Colonel Forster managed to find out, no marriage has taken place.
No marriage!
Lydia has eloped. She has gone off with Mr. Wickham and he seems to have no intention of marrying her.
Colonel Forster believes they may be headed for London. I will start for them immediately. Uncle Gardner may be able to help you trace them.
Why did the Forsters let her out of their sight? No one could watch Lydia all the time, Mamma.
Oh, no, is Mr. Benny going off to London? And I know he will find Mr. Wickham.
Then he will be killed, and we shall all be saying out in his house, all because you would not marry Mr. Collins.
Collins will turn him out of this house before his mother is caught in his
Miss Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy's here to see you.
Mr. Darcy. Show him in.
Miss Elizabeth,
Do you do, Mr. Darcy? I'm surprised to see you.
would you not also be a little happy to see me?
Happy? Oh, I find it hard to be happy.
What is the matter, Miss Elizabeth?
Mr. Darcy.
Shall I get you a glass of water?
No, there is nothing the matter with me. Only distressed by some dreadful news.
Try to calm yourself, Miss Elizabeth. I was riding back to London after my visit to Lady Catherine. How fortunate it was that I stopped in here.
Is it?
If you will allow me to be of some service to you.
No one can do much for us now. My sister Lydia has eloped. She's thrown herself into the power of Mr. Wickham. You know his true character well enough to doubt the rest.
Wickham?
She has no money, no connections, nothing that will tempt him to marry her.
Now you know his true character.
Mr. Darcy, how we have wronged you in regard to him.
I am grieved. Shocked.
But is it certain? Absolutely certain?
Yes.
And what is being done to recover her?
My father is going to London, but nothing can be done. We are in disgrace.
Control your tears, please, Miss Elizabeth.
Such humiliation. No one will speak to us again.
I only wish there was something I could say or do to ease you in your distress.
Lydia is lost forever.
Don't give up all hope, Miss Elizabeth. Now, I must ask you to excuse me.
You are going?
To London, immediately.
trace of Lydia or Mr. Wickham in London. He returned home disconsolate, leaving Mr. Gardner to continue the investigations. Mrs. Bennet remained in her room, and a melancholy air settled over the house, aided by Mary, who persisted in quoting from her extracts.
Your mother any better this morning?
Very little. She declares over and over that her heart is broken.
I blame myself for this. I can find no trace of Lydia or Wickham in London.
You mustn't be too severe on yourself, Papa.
No, Lizzie, for once in my life, let me feel I have been to blame. I should have taken your advice and never let Lydia go to Brighton.
Well, it's too late for that now.
Jane is persuading Mamma to come downstairs for a little while. Is she dressing?
Yes, although she declares she's too weak to stand.
The mother always knows how to give such elegance to misfortune. Perhaps I may do the same next time when Kitty runs away.
I'm not going to run away, Papa. If I were to go to Brighton, I should behave better than Lydia.
You'll go to Brighton? No, Kitty. I've at least learned to be cautious and you will feel the effects of it.
Papa!
Well, now, please. Don't make yourself unhappy. If you're a good girl for the next 10 years, I may take you to the theatre at the end of it.
Mr. Bingley is expected back this morning. Oh,
I'm glad you find pleasure in the situation. Wickham, I'd like to work with you.
Did you hear about it? Well, how can I know when we ourselves voted for this family? I'm afraid they might not. We passed Lady Lucy's carriage on our way down, and I was determined you should know it. So I took off my glove and let my hand rest on the side of the carriage, so that you might see my ring. And then I bowed and smiled like anything. How could you?
Your bonnet is the prettiest I've ever seen.
Mum was far too gay.
Oh, I must tell Hill to get the south chamber ready for her.
Yes, I'll go with you. I want to see your face when she hits me.
Oh, come on, Mary. I may find you useful too.
Now I must tell Mamma about my wedding.
I hope it passed off well.
Aren't you curious to know how it was managed?
No.
Mamma, you're both
So strange. But I must tell you how it went on. My Aunt Malcolm and I went together to the church, and Mr. Wickham and Mr. Darcy met us there. Mr. Darcy? Oh yes, he was the one who found us. Now was I surprised when he walked in. Mr. Darcy found you? Gracious me. He warned me not to say a word about it. But there, the cat's out of the bag, so I may as well go on.
What did Mr. Darcy do?
Oh, he settled £1,000 on me and purchased a commission for my dear Wickham in Newcastle.
Newcastle? You're going to be quite far from us.
Oh, but you must all come and visit me, and I shall arrange the balls for you. You shall ask Mamma at once. So Mr. Darcy should have done all this for our family. Oh, the humiliation is more than I can bear.
He has done it for you, Lizzie.
I'm afraid to let myself believe that. You must. I'm humble, but proud of him.
I'm afraid I interrupt sisterly confidences.
You do.
But it does not follow that the interruption must be a welcome.
I should hope not. We were always such good friends, and now we're much more.
I understand you saw something of Mr. Darcy in town, Mr. Wickham.
I did. He's very busy, but very well.
No doubt preparing for his marriage with Mr. Berg.
I have no doubt about that at all. His Aunt Catherine is determined to announce the engagement.
I'm sure I wish him every happiness.
What Wickham has done in the past is over. Let us try to forget it.
Now, Mary, sit down and write the items as I tell you.
Yes, Mamma.
Now, let's see. We must have calico, muslin, cambric, yes, Mr. Charles Bingley. Good gracious, so soon! Oh, show him in, show him in. Yes. Oh, Jane, go put on a new frock. Oh, no, Mr. Tyler. Oh, very well, dear, very well. Yes, Kitty, stop fretting and greet him with a smile. You see, they're in very best manners. My dear Mr. Bingley.
I hope you have no objections, madam, to this early call.
Objections? Oh, dear me, no, none at all, Mr. Bingley. Oh, please do sit down.
Thank you.
I began to be afraid you'd never come back here again, Mr. Bingley. So much has happened since you went away. Oh, yes, Miss Lucas is married and settled, and my daughter Lydia, too.
Allow me to offer my congratulations to them both.
Well, if you will excuse me, I must see about something.
Just a matter, Mamma. What does it want me to do?
Do, child.
Nothing. Winking, dear. Winking. Oh, no, I'm not winking.
I've just got something in my eye, that's all.
Oh, dear. Yes, that's better. Come on, Kitty, I want to speak to you. Come on.
Miss Bennet,
Yes, Mr. Bingley? Lizzie! Lizzie!
Oh, beg your pardon for interrupting, Mr. Bingley.
I shall finish my notes upstairs.
Miss Bennet? Miss Bennet, ever since we first met, I have admired you greatly. Unfortunately, circumstances over which I had no control forced me to remain silent on the matter. I understand you called when you were in town last spring.
That is so, Mr. Bingley. But you were not at home.
Believe me, I was totally ignorant of you being in town. But now, I have no reason to withhold from you the true measure of my affection. Is it possible my feelings might be reciprocated, even to a modest degree?
Mr. Bingley, I cannot deny the existence of a considerable pleasure when I am in your company.
Then, Miss Bennet, I shall come to the point without further delay. Would you consider the possibility of becoming my wife? There, now it is out. What say you, Miss Bennet?
I will allow you to speak to my father on the subject.
Does that mean...
There is nothing that would give me greater pleasure than to be your wife.
My dear, dear Jane, I was so afraid you might refuse me. I would like to speak to your father at once.
At this hour of the day, you're sure to find him in the library, reading the Times.
I will seek him out this instant. Pray, excuse me.
Maybe I might meet with another Mr. Collins.
I do hope so, Lizzie. I do hope so.
Lady Catherine de Bear, madam. Tell Mamma she is here, please, and then show her in. Yes, Miss Elizabeth.
She must be calling to see me.
Very strange. Thoroughly dislike each other. Lady Catherine, it is a surprise.
I hope you are well, Miss Bennet.
Oh, mercy, Lady Catherine.
This lady, I suppose, is your mother.
Yes.
And that, I suppose, is one of your sisters.
Oh, yes, Lady Catherine. This is Jane, my eldest. My second youngest.
Miss Bennet, I desire to speak with you alone.
Very well, Lady Catherine.
Of course, Lady Catherine said it was
Alone!
Yes, oh, thank you, Lady Catherine. Come along, Jane.
I'm at no loss, Miss Bennet, to understand the reason for my journey here.
Indeed, madam, you are mistaken.
I'm not to be trifled with, however insincere you may choose to be. You may not find me so. A report of the most alarming nature has reached me. I was told that you are scheming to marry my nephew, Mr. Darcy. Oh, of course. I know it is a scandalous falsehood. Such an alliance would be impossible.
If you thought it impossible, I wonder that you took the trouble of coming so far.
I insist that you declare there is no foundation for it.
Indeed.
Do you deny it? Has my nephew made you an offer of marriage?
He has not.
Do you know who I am? I am not accustomed to such impudence as this. I am Mr. Darcy's nearest relative, and as such am entitled to know his dearest concerns.
But you are not entitled to know mine, nor will behaviour such as this induce me to be more explicit.
Mr. Darcy, is engaged to my daughter.
If that is so, you can have no reason to suppose that he would make an offer to me.
Obstinate, headstrong girl. Think twice before you marry one so far above you. My daughter has family connections, wealth. You have nothing. Such a marriage would be a disgrace.
Mr. Darcy is a gentleman, and I am a gentleman's daughter. So far, we are equal.
Perhaps so. But what about the rest of your family? For once and for all, are you engaged to him?
I am not.
And do you promise me never to enter into such an engagement?
I make no promise of the kind.
Then you could have no regard for the honour and credit of my nephew, you unfeeling, selfish girl. You are resolved to have him?
I have said nothing of the kind. I am only resolved to act in a manner which will constitute my happiness.
Very well then, I shall know how to act. But do not think your ambition in regard to Mr. Darcy will ever be gratified.
Aunt Catherine, since Miss Elizabeth is too polite to ask you to leave her house, I must ask you to go.
My dear Darcy, if you had listened to the pretensions of this upstart girl...
At once!
I take no leave of you. I send no compliments to your mother. You deserve no such attentions. I am most seriously displeased.
Mr. Darcy, then you should have come upon such a scene.
It gives me courage to hope there may still be a chance for me. Is there, Miss Elizabeth?
You have done so much for me, for my family. Lydia told me.
I asked her not to mention it. In a way, I am to blame for not having told you of Wickham's true character.
But I wouldn't let you tell me anything.
It was you who sent Mr. Bingley back here, wasn't it?
I was wrong to send him away. Believe me, I hadn't realised the strength of Jane's attachment for him, or of his for her.
My behaviour to you has been abominable from the very beginning. You have repaid it only with kindness.
It was my behaviour that was unpardonable. My abominable pride.
And my abominable prejudice.
When I think of the things I have said to you,
I just despise myself.
Am I still the last man in the world you could ever be prevailed upon to marry, Miss Elizabeth? You're too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are what they were, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you on the subject will silence me forever.
my feelings.
Oh, my feelings. When I remember what I said then, I'm so ashamed. My feelings are so different. In fact, they're quite the opposite.
My behaviour to you at the time was abominable. I can hardly think on it without abhorrence. I have been a selfish being all my life. As a child I was given good principles. I'd left to follow them in pride and conceit. And as such, I might still be. But for you, dearest, loveliest Elizabeth, I cannot fix the hour, or the spot, the look, or the words, which laid the foundation of my love for you. Will you do me the very great honour of becoming my wife?
I believe there is nothing that I would desire more in the world. My father, if you wish to ask him, is in the library.
I shall go to him at once.
Oh, my dear, dear Jane, I shan't get a wink of sleep all night. Oh, he's the
My dear, your future sons-in-law.
Mr. Darcy! Yes, Mamma. I have loved him for a long time.
Dear Lizzie. Oh, Lord, gracious. Oh, Mr. Darcy, who just thought it?
Oh, my sweetest Lizzie!
Oh, my favourite daughter.
Oh, thank you for your good wishes, Mamma.
Will you excuse us if we walk in the garden?
Oh, I'm sure we'd excuse them with Mr. Bennet.
I think we had better, yes.
Oh, just think of it, I'm to have 3 sons-in-law. Oh.
When the young men come to bed your kitty,